In the middle of September 1989, a hunter was walking peacefully through the Manistee National Forest in Newaygo, Michigan. His walk ended in something terrible. Deep in a spot in the woods called the Hole in the Woods, he found 18-year-old Shannon Siders. She had been badly beaten. Her life was gone. This sad discovery broke Newaygo's peace. A murder investigation stopped making progress. A killer or killers disappeared into the woods, leaving only questions. For 25 painful years, her father, Bob Siders, lived with sadness. Newaygo lived with an open wound. Then in 2014, the quiet evidence finally spoke. Scientists used advanced DNA testing and fiber analysis on Shannon's saved clothing. They also found her special senior class ring with the engraving SS-89, a trophy kept by her killer. This finally showed what happened in the past. The arrests shocked everyone. The people who did it weren't strangers. They were known faces in the community, people who had said they were sorry for Shannon's death, people who had even helped investigators, all while hiding the darkest secret, hidden right in front of everyone. Before we tell this story of scary lies and the final victory of not giving up, please think about hitting the like button and subscribing. Our channel brings powerful true crime stories, making sure that justice, no matter how late, is never forgotten. This story shows how a town's trust can be broken, how killers hide for decades, and how justice after 25 years finally caught up in Newaygo, giving a powerful voice to Shannon Siders. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a safe place, where familiar faces hide disturbing truths? Let me know in the comments below. In Newaygo, the monsters weren't hiding in shadows. They were walking among everyone, until the truth finally broke through their quiet lives. Newaygo, Michigan, in the summer of 1989 was a place where life moved along with a gentle rhythm. Controlled by the flow of the Muskegon River and the thick forests of red pine that surrounded its edges, it was a town of just over 1,500 people. Everyone knew your business. Being anonymous was something you could only find in the big, quiet woods. To outsiders, it might have seemed charming, even sleepy. But to those who called it home, it was a picture woven with generations of shared lives, quiet dreams, and the deep roots of community. Shannon Siders was the bright thread that made that picture brighter. At 18, just graduated from Newaygo High School, she was a young woman full of restless energy and a contagious laugh that could cut through the saddest moods. She wasn't just another teenager. She was a beloved daughter, a treasured friend, and a light of youthful hope. Her father, Bob Siders, a kind-eyed man who worked the midnight shift at the local bottling plant, often described her as a firecracker, always chasing the next adventure, but with a heart as big and open as the Michigan sky. Shannon was his world, especially after her mother had died years before. This left them to get through life's quiet corners together, including their recent move into a new, smaller apartment in the heart of town. A fresh start they were both quietly celebrating. Life after high school held a familiar mix of excitement and uncertainty for many in Newaygo. While some friends planned to marry young or join their parents in the local businesses, Shannon saw beyond the town's familiar borders. Her bedroom, showing her personality, was a cheerful mess of classic rock posters, handwritten song lyrics, and worn poetry books. Tucked away on her desk, beneath a stack of applications, was a brochure for Grand Valley State University. Circled heavily in red, she dreamed of studying English, of writing, of seeing the world beyond the pine trees. Every extra shift she picked up at the local diner, every dollar she saved, was set aside for that dream. A future where her words, not just her laughter, could fill a room. That girl had her whole life mapped out, her close friend Jennifer Hayes often said. She wanted to be the first in our circle to really make something big of herself. She just sparkled with that quiet kind of confidence only dreamers have. Shannon loved the small-town life with excitement, enjoying bonfires by the river, late-night talks at the local hangout, and cruising Main Street with her friends. Windows down, music blaring, she wasn't seriously dating anyone. Her focus was firmly on her dreams. Her senior year class ring, a symbol of her accomplishments and the future she was building, was always on her right hand, engraved with her initials SS and the year 89. It was a real reminder of where she'd been and where she was determined to go. Tuesday, July 18, 1989 started like countless other summer days in Newaygo, promising heat in the slow pace of youth. For Shannon, the day ended not in a diner shift or library visit, but in a small private gathering at her new apartment. It was a quiet celebration of sorts. A housewarming for just her father Bob, and her closest friend Jennifer Hayes. They shared stories and laughter. The air filled with the comfortable feeling of home, a feeling especially meaningful for their fresh start in the new place. Around 10:30 at night, as the evening began to wind down, Bob Siders, tired from a day that had started early, said goodnight to the two girls. He imagined them soon calling it a night. Perhaps Jennifer would head home and Shannon would be asleep by the time he left for work. Just moments before, Shannon had put on an old classic rock song, pulling Jennifer into a sudden silly dance in their new living room. Her laughter, bright and free, echoed through the small apartment, filling the space with the lively hope and endless joy of an 18-year-old on the edge of her future. After Bob went to bed, Shannon and Jennifer decided to stretch their legs. The summer night was thick and warm, smelling of pine and damp earth after an earlier afternoon shower. The streetlights cast long, soft shadows as they walked to a nearby convenience store, their sneakers whispering against the sidewalk. They bought some sodas and snacks, enjoying the cool blast of air conditioning inside the brightly lit store, and the casual, everyday comfort of teenage friendship. Between 11:30 at night on July 18th and 2 in the morning on July 19th, after leaving the convenience store and walking back towards the apartment, Shannon and Jennifer ran into the Jones brothers, Paul and Matthew. Paul, a few years older than Shannon, was known for his restless energy and quick temper, while his younger brother Matthew was often a quieter, but equally intense presence beside him. Their family had a long history in Newaygo, and their reputation, while often scary, was also just part of the local landscape. As the two groups exchanged a few words on the quiet street, Paul and Matt offered Shannon a ride. Jennifer remembered a quick hesitation in Shannon's posture, a slight shift of weight, but in the end she knew them, trusted them enough to accept. Shannon said a quick goodbye to Jennifer, a casual wave as she climbed into the Joneses' beat-up sedan. Jennifer clearly remembered the dim street lamp glinting off Shannon's senior class ring, engraved with SS89. A sudden, unexplainable chill ran down Jennifer's spine, a nameless fear. But Shannon just smiled and waved. It would be the last time Jennifer would ever see that smile. When Bob Siders returned home from his shift at the bottling plant on the morning of Wednesday, July 19, 1989, a knot of worry tightened in his stomach. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Shannon wasn't there. A quick call to Jennifer Hayes confirmed his worst fears. Shannon never arrived home after getting into the Jones brothers' car. Within minutes, the comfortable routine of Bob's life shattered into a frantic search. He immediately contacted the Newaygo County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Mark Thorne, an experienced officer who knew most families in town, arrived at Bob's apartment by mid-morning. Jennifer, still clearly shaken, told investigators how Shannon had gotten into Paul and Matthew Jones's car. This statement immediately placed the brothers at the center of the growing investigation. Thorne didn't wait. Paul and Matthew Jones were among the first people the police interviewed. During that first questioning, both brothers told the same story. They had given Shannon a ride home and dropped her off safely at the end of the road near her apartment around 2 in the morning. They even offered convincing details, mentioning a porch light being on, a TV visible inside, and Shannon's dog moving about, which gave their story believability. Despite the seeming truth of their story, the Jones brothers were considered main suspects. Deputy Thorne and his team knew something was wrong. They quickly got permission to search the Jones brothers' vehicle. Yet with the forensic technology available in 1989, investigators found nothing definite. No blood, no fibers, no trace evidence that could clearly contradict their story or tie them to Shannon's disappearance. There was simply no physical evidence strong enough to press charges. The suspicion stayed, a dark cloud over the Jones brothers. But without proof, the investigation was quickly stopped. While investigators continued to closely watch the Jones brothers, Bob Siders poured his sadness into action. He organized search parties with neighbors and friends, combing through every familiar spot along the Muskegon River, checking abandoned cabins and quiet clearings. He personally drove to every gas station and convenience store in Newaygo and neighboring towns, pinning up missing person flyers decorated with Shannon's bright, hopeful smile. Local radio stations broadcast descriptions of Shannon and what she had been wearing, while community volunteers like Amy Bonner rallied to help hand out more flyers. Working tirelessly alongside a heartbroken Bob Siders, the entire town held its breath, hoping for a sign, a phone call, anything to break the choking silence. Days turned into weeks, and hope, a fragile thing, began to wear thin. The relentless Michigan summer gave way to the crisp golden colors of early autumn. Then, during Labor Day weekend in early September 1989, a sad discovery brought new energy to the fading search, though not in the way anyone had hoped. Two hikers enjoying the last bits of summer in the remote wooded area of the Manistee National Forest, a place locally known as the Hole in the Woods, stumbled upon two pieces of identification with Shannon Siders' name. Her student ID card and a faded library card lay partly hidden beneath a tangle of undergrowth. This confirmed that Shannon had indeed been in that lonely area, a place well known among teenagers for parties, but now filled with a chilling new meaning. The finding sent a fresh wave of terror through Newaygo. The discovery gave new energy to the search effort, focusing resources on the thick, unforgiving red pine plantation. Just days later, in mid-September 1989, a hunter going deeper into the hole in the woods miles from any paved road made the horrible discovery. Shannon's body lay hidden among the thick trees and undergrowth. He immediately reported it to the state police post in Newaygo. The medical examiner arriving at the lonely scene documented severe injuries. Shannon had been badly beaten, suffering blunt force trauma to the head, which was determined to be the cause of death. Along with this grim finding, investigators carefully collected Shannon's clothing, noting the presence of foreign fibers and hairs, preserving these as important pieces of evidence. Even if their full potential would remain unused for decades, there was also evidence consistent with sexual assault, including injuries and positioning that suggested rape and mutilation in the perineal area. The quiet mystery of a missing girl had sadly transformed into the brutal reality of a murder investigation. With Shannon Siders' body discovered and the grim reality of murder confirmed, the Newaygo County Sheriff's Department, alongside the Michigan State Police, made their efforts stronger. Detective Pat Headland, a veteran investigator whose calm manner hid a tough will, took a lead role. The Manistee National Forest area, particularly the Hole in the Woods, became a lonely, sprawling crime scene. Forensic teams carefully combed the area, using every technique available in the late 1980s. They searched for footprints, tire tracks, and any other thrown-away items that might point to a criminal. Despite their exhaustive efforts, the remote natural environment, combined with the passage of time since Shannon's disappearance in July, offered few definite clues. The discovery of her ID in early September and her body weeks later meant the weather had taken its toll on potential evidence, making a perfect recovery impossible. Investigators re-interviewed Jennifer Hayes and the other 7 people who had been among the last to see Shannon alive. With the Jones brothers, these 8 statements were carefully pieced together to rebuild a timeline, making it clear that Shannon had indeed gotten into Paul and Matthew Jones's car. The brothers, already under a cloud of suspicion from their first interviews, were brought in again. Their alibi re-examined, they stuck to their story. They dropped her off. They even passed their polygraph tests, a common but often unreliable tool of that time, which further complicated the picture. While hairs and fibers had been collected from Shannon's clothing at the scene, the forensic technology of 1989 simply did not allow investigators to clearly link them to specific people like the Jones brothers. Without that definite physical evidence to contradict their alibi or to press charges, the case remained stuck in a frustrating standstill. One important detail, however, haunted Detective Headland. Shannon's senior class ring, it was a special piece, engraved with her initials SS and the year 89. A treasured possession she wore constantly, the ring was not found at her apartment. Nor was it found at the terrible scene in the Hole in the Woods. Headland recognized its absence as a powerful unspoken lead, a real link that, if found, could point directly to the killer. He confided in Deputy Thorne, "If we could find that ring, we could find the person who killed Shannon." Yet despite its importance, this detail was carefully kept from the public, a strategic piece of information meant to confirm a future confession or witness testimony. The missing ring became the silent, tempting key to the entire mystery. As 1989 came to a close and a freezing Michigan winter set in, the active investigation began to slow down. The lack of decisive physical evidence that could be linked to the Jones brothers, coupled with their past polygraphs and unshakable, though suspicious alibis, meant that the case, despite having clear persons of interest, couldn't move forward. Newaygo, a town once gripped by frantic fear, now settled into a deep, chilling sadness. Shannon Siders' photograph, once plastered on every storefront, began to fade. The Michigan State Police scaled back their involvement. And while local law enforcement, including Detective Headland, refused to close the file, the daily momentum stopped. The hole in the woods became a silent, lonely monument to a broken promise of justice. The Siders case officially entered the grim category of cold. Another unsolved mystery whispered about in the quiet corners of Newaygo. A wound that would hurt for decades in the heart of the community. Time moves differently when a crime remains unsolved, particularly in a small town haunted by its memory. For Bob Siders, the calendar became both a torture and a grim companion. Each passing day without answers deepened his sadness, yet also brought him one day closer, he hoped, to the truth. People tell you that grief gets easier with time, Bob would explain in a 1995 interview with a local paper, his voice raw with decades of longing. But when there's no closure, no body to bury, no justice for your daughter, you're stuck in this terrible in-between. You can't move forward, and you can't truly go back to who you were. The small apartment, once a symbol of a fresh start for Shannon and Bob, became a shrine of sorts to his lost daughter. Shannon's bedroom remained mostly untouched, her poetry book still stacked on the nightstand, concert ticket stubs pinned to a corkboard. Bob, who continued to work his shifts at the bottling plant, would carefully dust the room on his days off. As if Shannon might walk through the door any moment and need a clean space to plan her next adventure, he channeled his deep grief into relentless fighting, refusing to let her memory fade. He attended every town council meeting, spoke to every reporter, and personally reviewed what police reports he could access, seeking any overlooked detail. He became a familiar yet heartbreaking figure at the Newaygo County Sheriff's Department. Always polite, always persistent, a living reminder of a promise unfulfilled. Bob's unwavering dedication inspired a core group of community members, including Amy Bonner, to continue Shannon's vigil. Every July 18th, on the anniversary of her disappearance, they organized a quiet gathering near the entrance to the Manistee National Forest. Close to where her ID had been found, candles were lit, prayers were said, and fresh flyers, now yellowed at the edges but still bearing Shannon's youthful face, were handed out. What began with dozens of participants gradually shrank to a faithful few. But the family and their closest supporters never missed a year. Local media covered these anniversaries, though the stories grew shorter with each passing decade. Reflecting the slow creep of public forgetting, the only comfort for Bob was that the Jones brothers, Paul and Matthew, remained firmly on law enforcement's radar. A quiet understanding shared between him and Detective Headland that suspicion, even without proof, never truly dies. But as the 1990s gave way to a new millennium, the case of Shannon Siders, like so many others across the country, settled deeper into the files. A cold case gathering dust, the initial lack of decisive physical evidence to connect the Jones brothers to the crime, coupled with their consistent alibis and past polygraphs in 1989, had created an impossible barrier for investigators. The critical details known to witnesses like Jennifer Hayes, that Shannon had entered the Joneses' car, were not enough without further direct evidence of the murder itself. Throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, Newaygo, like many small towns in Michigan, experienced its own quiet changes. Local factories faced money problems, leading to closures and a gradual shift in the town's population, as younger residents sought opportunities in Grand Rapids or Lansing. The familiar faces of older residents slowly gave way to new families, many of whom knew of Shannon Siders only as a whispered local tragedy, a cautionary tale from another time. The Manistee National Forest, the silent witness to her final moments, remained vast and unchanging. But the paths leading to the hole in the woods became less walked, less known to the younger generations. The Newaygo County Sheriff's Department also saw its own changes. Veteran officers like Detective Pat Headland, who had carried the burden of Shannon's unsolved case for years, eventually retired. His office, once covered with maps and timelines, was cleared for new leadership. Headland's replacement, Detective Sergeant Adam Mercer, represented a new generation of law enforcement. Mercer brought fresh eyes and an unwavering belief that no case was ever truly cold, just waiting for the right moment, the right piece of information, or the right technology to bring it back to life. He kept a photograph of Shannon Siders on his desk, a quiet promise to Bob and to the community. By the 2000s, forensic science was going through a revolution. DNA analysis, once a new field in 1989, had become a powerful, definite tool. New national databases and advanced testing methods offered unprecedented opportunities to revisit old evidence. Detective Mercer, along with other forward-thinking investigators, began to push for a dedicated approach to the county's unsolved homicides. He saw the potential in using these modern techniques against the physical evidence carefully, though perhaps unknowingly, preserved by earlier detectives. This local push coincided with a broader initiative within the Michigan State Police. Recognizing the emotional toll and societal cost of lingering cold cases across the state, a new specialized unit was conceived. In the early 2010s, after years of fighting and strategic planning, the Michigan State Police Cold Case Team was officially established. Its mandate was clear: to revisit long unsolved mysteries, applying modern forensic science and fresh investigative perspectives to cases that had once seemed hopeless. Detective Sergeant Adam Mercer, known for his methodical thoroughness and relentless pursuit of justice, was assigned to the team. The Siders case, with its identified persons of interest and its tragic brutality, immediately stood out. It was one of the first cases the newly formed cold case team decided to tackle. Mercer, along with Detective John Forner, a careful timeline expert, and Detective Mike Stevens, a skilled re-interviewer, began the hard task of reviewing every single document from the original 1989 investigation. Thousands of pages of reports, witness statements, interview transcripts, and forensic notes once stored in dusty boxes were now digitized, cross-referenced, and analyzed with modern software. Their mission was clear: to find the cracks in the old stories, to re-examine the silent witnesses of evidence, and to finally break the decades-long silence that had protected Shannon's killers. The investigation into the murder of Shannon Siders, asleep for nearly 25 years, was officially reopened. The Michigan State Police Cold Case Team's office, a converted conference room at the Newaygo Post, quickly became a hub of renewed purpose. The walls were soon covered with maps of the Manistee National Forest, detailed timelines of July 18th and 19th, 1989, and photographs of a smiling Shannon Siders. Detective Sergeant Adam Mercer, leading the charge, made sure that Shannon's information was immediately entered into national missing persons and homicide databases that hadn't existed in 1989. Cold cases are never truly cold, Mercer often reminded his team. They're just waiting for the right piece of information, the right technology, for the right person to come forward. Their first important step was a complete review of the original 1989 case files. Thousands of pages of police reports, initial witness statements, and forensic notes were not just read but carefully digitized and cross-referenced by Detective John Forner, who excelled at spotting inconsistencies in decades-old accounts. The team approached the Siders investigation with fresh eyes, but with immense respect for the diligent, if technologically limited, work of the original detectives like Pat Headland. Those original detectives were working with the tools they had, Forner would later reflect. Our advantage isn't that we're better investigators. It's that we have better technology and the ability to look back without the pressure of the initial 48-hour window. That better technology included the revolutionary advancements in forensic science. The small, carefully collected pieces of physical evidence from 1989, Shannon's clothing still bearing the foreign fibers and hairs, represented a silent promise. These items, once analyzed only by basic microscopic comparison, now held the potential for DNA analysis. In 2011, as one of their first acts, the cold case team sent all the old physical evidence to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab in Lansing for modern DNA testing and advanced fiber analysis. It was a painstaking process, requiring the utmost care with decades-old, potentially damaged samples. While awaiting the results of the forensic re-examination, Detectives Mercer, Forner, and Stevens started the equally hard task of re-interviewing dozens of people who had been involved in or knew something about the case in 1989, they carefully rebuilt the events of that fateful summer night, seeking out former friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have crossed paths with Shannon or the Jones brothers. They were not just looking for new information, but for subtle shifts in old stories, for memories that time might have softened, or for fears that circumstances might have finally calmed. Many original witnesses had moved away. Some had died. But the team's persistence led them to the remaining few. This renewed investigation aimed to finally break the human silence that had protected Shannon's killers for so long. The Jones brothers, Paul and Matthew, had remained in the Newaygo area for years, their reputation for being unpredictable still quietly known. But as decades passed and their immediate local influence faded, the environment began to shift. The fear of payback that had once paralyzed potential witnesses began to fade. Replaced by the weight of conscience, the cold case detectives, through patient, empathetic questioning, started to build the trust necessary to encourage long-held secrets to finally come out into the light. The stage was set for the breakthrough that Newaygo had waited a quarter of a century to hear. The wait for forensic results stretched through 2012 and into 2013. A painful period for the cold case. The Michigan State Police Crime Lab, though state-of-the-art, was dealing with an unprecedented surge in cold case submissions from departments across Michigan. This created a significant backlog, making the delicate analysis of decades-old samples from the Siders case a drawn-out, though necessary, process. Meanwhile, Detectives Mercer, Forner, and Stevens continued their relentless re-interview process. They carefully revisited every witness from 1989 and then expanded their search to anyone who might have heard whispers or suspicions over the years. This painstaking work, combined with the changing dynamics in Newaygo, slowly began to chip away at the wall of silence that had protected the Jones brothers. One of the first important breakthroughs came from a former acquaintance of Paul Jones, Lindsay Bradley. She had been a girlfriend of Paul's in the months after Shannon's disappearance. In a series of cautious, trust-building interviews with Detective Stevens, Lindsay finally revealed a long-held secret that sent a jolt through the investigation. She recounted an unsettling memory from that time. While sitting in Paul's car one day, she noticed a high school class ring glinting in the ashtray mixed with loose change. When she asked Paul about it, he was dismissive, claiming he'd just found it somewhere. Lindsay's curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up and saw the small personal engraving inside, SS-89. Realizing the initials matched the name of the missing girl the whole town was talking about, she confronted him again. It was then, she said, that Paul responded with a chilling, offhand comment. "She's probably dead." When Lindsay Bradley recounted finding the ring in the ashtray, the interview room fell into a heavy, absolute silence. Detective Stevens, usually composed, felt a cold jolt run down his spine. This was more than just a lead. It was real evidence. A quarter-century-old lie shattered by a small, cruel detail. It was the confirmation of Headland's decades-old hunch, a physical anchor to the evil they hunted. As the team processed Lindsay Bradley's bombshell testimony, the forensic results from the Michigan State Police Crime Lab began to arrive. Between 2013 and early 2014, the scientific analysis using modern DNA and fiber technologies unavailable in 1989 delivered the undeniable proof that investigators had dreamed of for a quarter-century. The hairs collected from Shannon's clothing at the crime scene in September 1989 were successfully analyzed, yielding DNA profiles. These profiles showed DNA matches to both Paul and Matthew Jones. Further advanced testing of the microfiber samples found on Shannon's clothing revealed a match to the type of upholstery in the Jones brothers' car, the very vehicle that had been searched without conclusion in 1989. The original detectives' careful preservation of evidence, though limited by past technology, had finally paid off. The coming together of Lindsay Bradley's damning testimony about the missing ring and the definite DNA and fiber evidence created an overwhelming, undeniable case. After 25 years, the silence of the grave and the silence of fear had both been shattered. The truth had finally clawed its way out of the shadows and into the light. With the double breakthroughs of Lindsay Bradley's testimony and the definite DNA evidence, Detectives Mercer, Forner, and Stevens had their undeniable targets. Paul and Matthew Jones. Their immediate task was to build a thorough profile of the brothers. Examining their lives over the past 25 years, they discovered that the Jones brothers, true to the pattern of many predators who escape initial capture, had built lives designed to avoid attention, blending into the fabric of Newaygo and its surrounding communities. Paul Jones, the older brother, had been 27 years old in 1989. After Shannon's disappearance, he remained in the Newaygo area, holding various blue-collar jobs that offered a degree of moving around but kept him within familiar territory. He married in the mid-1990s, had 2 children, and on paper, settled into a semblance of normality. He volunteered occasionally at local events, attended church irregularly, and maintained a polite if reserved manner with neighbors. There were no major problems with the law beyond a few minor violations like disorderly conduct or traffic violations. His younger brother Matthew, 25 in 1989, followed a similar path. He also remained in the area, taking up work in construction. He never married but maintained a small social circle, often seen at local bars but rarely causing obvious trouble. They were just the Jones brothers, Detective Mercer later reflected, describing the difficulty in seeing them as anything other than a part of the local landscape. Everyone knew they had a reputation, a certain unpredictability, but they seemed to have settled down. No one looked twice, which is precisely how someone hiding a deadly secret survives for so long. Their ability to maintain a quiet existence, to project an air of unremarkable stability, was what had allowed them to escape justice for so long. They hadn't fled the country or drastically changed their identities. Instead, they had subtly integrated, waiting out the storm of suspicion. The most chilling aspect of their long escape, however, was their continued presence in Newaygo. They had remained within miles of where Shannon's body was found, living lives that appeared outwardly ordinary, while carrying the horrific secret of her murder. The fact that they had been among the first and strongest suspects in 1989, yet had successfully deflected suspicion for a quarter-century, spoke to a calculated cleverness. They had understood the limitations of 1989 forensics and the unspoken social codes of their small town. Using both to their advantage, their past polygraphs, unreliable as they were, had bought them invaluable time. Convincing enough to prevent charges in the absence of hard evidence. But time had finally delivered the tools that the Jones brothers had once been protected from. The cold case unit now possessed the direct physical links that 1989 investigators could only dream of, combined with eyewitness testimony that shattered their long-held alibis. The facade of normality, carefully built over 25 years, was now paper-thin, ready to crumble under the weight of overwhelming evidence. The stage was set for the culmination of decades of yearning for justice. The arrests of Paul and Matthew Jones. The arrest of 2 suspects in a 25-year-old cold case requires careful planning. Once the combined force of Lindsay Bradley's testimony and the definite DNA evidence identified Paul and Matthew Jones as their targets, the cold case team, led by Detective Sergeant Adam Mercer, assembled a specialized unit to handle every aspect of the operation. The stakes were enormous. A botched arrest could jeopardize the entire case, potentially allowing the killers to walk free on procedural grounds, thus denying Bob Siders and the community the justice they had so long awaited. The arrest team included members from multiple agencies: Newaygo County detectives, Michigan State Police tactical officers, and specialized units from neighboring counties. Each brought specific expertise to the operation. Planning sessions covered every detail, from the approach to the properties to the exact wording officers would use during the arrests. District Attorney Lisa Thompson, who had been closely working with the cold case team, worked alongside them to ensure all legal requirements were met. Search warrants were prepared, not just for the Jones brothers' residences but also for their vehicles, electronic devices, and any storage units registered in their names. When you're dealing with someone who's potentially been hiding a crime for decades, Thompson noted, you have to consider they might have kept trophies or other evidence. We needed to be thorough. The team debated the timing and approach. A public arrest at a workplace might minimize risk to officers but could create unnecessary chaos or tip off the other brother. A traffic stop presented its own dangers. Ultimately, they decided on pre-dawn residential arrests, designed to catch both suspects at their most vulnerable. while minimizing risk to the community and preventing any attempt to destroy evidence. On May 28, 2014, at precisely 5 a.m, tactical teams simultaneously descended upon the separate Newaygo area homes of Paul and Matthew Jones. The neighborhoods were quiet, most residents still asleep. At Paul Jones's residence, officers took position around the perimeter. Detective Sergeant Mercer, alongside 2 state police detectives, approached the front door. Mercer knocked firmly, announcing, "State Police. Search warrant." They expected resistance or at least delay. To their surprise, lights came on almost immediately. Within moments, Paul Jones opened the door, wearing pajama bottoms and a faded t-shirt, looking confused but not panicked. He seemed more annoyed than afraid, Mercer recalled, as if they were interrupting his sleep for a minor matter. That changed when Mercer stated clearly, "Paul Jones, you're under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Shannon Marie Siders on July 19, 1989. Paul's expression transformed. The annoyance was replaced by shock, then something harder to define. A flicker of cold recognition in his eyes. He didn't speak, didn't resist as officers secured his hands with zip ties. His wife appeared in the hallway behind him, confused and frightened, asking repeatedly what was happening. Simultaneously, Matthew Jones was arrested without incident at his own home a few miles away. As the brothers were led to waiting police vehicles, Detective John Forner observed something telling. Neither brother, once asked, said, "Who is Shannon Siders?" Neither claimed not to know the name. This was unusual for someone being accused of a crime they didn't commit. Inside Paul's home, the search began immediately. In a cluttered drawer of his bedside table, investigators found a small unmarked box. Inside, carefully wrapped in a faded piece of cloth, was a single tarnished high school class ring, engraved with the initials SS and the year 89. It was the missing link, a trophy kept for a quarter century. By mid-morning, news of the arrests had spread through Newaygo like wildfire. Local radio stations interrupted programming to announce the breakthrough. Social media exploded with the news, residents sharing memories of where they had been when Shannon disappeared and how the case had affected their community. Bob Siders learned of the arrests in that pre-dawn phone call from Detective Mercer. After hanging up, he sat alone in his living room. The same room where he had last seen Shannon alive. The same room where he had waited by the phone for news of his daughter countless times over the decades. "I always knew this day would come," he told reporters who gathered outside his home later that morning, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and deep relief. "I just didn't know if I would live to see it." The community's response to the arrests of Paul and Matthew Jones reflected both shock at the suspects' identities and deep relief that the case had finally been solved. Longtime residents struggled to reconcile the familiar, unremarkable figures they vaguely remembered with the monsters now revealed. "They were just the Jones boys," said Arthur Finch, who had owned the local hardware store in 1989. "Came in for tools, made small talk. Nothing about them ever stood out. You shake your head knowing what they hid all these years." That ordinariness made the revelation all the more disturbing. The Jones brothers hadn't been hiding in shadows but in plain sight, behind a facade of normality that no one had thought to question. As Paul and Matthew Jones were processed at the Newaygo County Detention Center, booked on charges of kidnapping and first-degree murder, the weight of what had been accomplished began to sink in for the investigators. A case that had haunted 3 generations of law enforcement officers had finally been solved. "Cold cases are never really about the past," Detective Mercer reflected later. "They're about bringing justice into the present, about fulfilling promises that were made long ago. For Shannon, for Bob, for Newaygo, that promise is finally being kept. The wheels of justice, having moved imperceptibly for decades, suddenly accelerated." Paul and Matthew Jones made their first court appearance on May 29, 2014, via a video link from the Newaygo County Detention Center. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, community members, and retired law enforcement officers like Detective Pat Headland, who had worked the case over the years. District Attorney Lisa Thompson announced the state would be pursuing first-degree murder charges. Despite the challenges of prosecuting a 25-year-old case, Judge Robert Evans denied bail, citing the severity of the charges and the defendant's potential flight risk. The brothers remained expressionless throughout the hearing, speaking only to confirm their names and that they understood the charges against them. The legal proceedings moved with deliberate care. The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Thompson, carefully built their case. The DNA and fiber evidence, undeniable and scientifically definite, formed the cornerstone. They tracked down former acquaintances and current residents who could place the Jones brothers in the Newaygo area during the relevant time period. Lindsay, Bradley's testimony about finding Shannon's class ring in Paul's ashtray became a powerful piece of direct evidence, a chilling link that destroyed Paul's decades-old alibi. The ring itself, recovered from Paul's home, was presented as a real and heart-wrenching exhibit. In October 2014, a grand jury returned indictments on charges of kidnapping and first-degree murder against both Paul and Matthew Jones. The trial was scheduled for May 2015, almost exactly 26 years after Shannon's disappearance. As the legal process unfolded, Bob Siders experienced a complex mixture of emotions. There's relief, of course, he explained during an interview, but there's also this strange sense of loss. For 25 years, searching for answers gave me purpose. Now that we have them, I'm having to learn how to live differently. Bob Siders attended every hearing, often accompanied by Jennifer Hayes and Amy Bonner. They sat in the front row, directly in the Jones brothers' line of sight, a silent reminder of the life they had shattered. I wanted them to see us, Bob said, to know that Shannon wasn't just a name or a face on a flyer. She was my daughter. She was loved, and she is still loved. The trial itself lasted 3 weeks, a grueling ordeal of forensic details, witness testimony, and agonizing emotional impact. On November 5, 2015, after just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, Judge Evans sentenced both Paul Jones and Matthew Jones to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge delivered the life sentence, Bob Siders didn't cheer or weep. He simply stood, his shoulders slumping slightly, as if the immense burden of 25 years had finally been lifted. Yet the wound itself remained. He looked directly into the eyes of the two men who had stolen his daughter. Not with rage, but with a silent acknowledgement, an unspoken declaration that Shannon had at last found her justice. As the brothers were led from the courtroom, Bob Siders stood. A lifetime of grief and unwavering determination etched on his face, finally witnessing the justice he had fought for. The resolution of Shannon Siders' case sent ripples through Michigan's criminal justice system. The resounding success of the Michigan State Police cold case team inspired similar initiatives in other counties, leading to renewed focus and funding for long unsolved mysteries across the state. The Siders case became a compelling example of what is possible when dedicated investigators combine preserved evidence with modern forensic technology and an unwavering commitment to victims and their families. The Siders case demonstrated what's possible when you combine preserved evidence with modern technology and dedicated investigators, reflected Dr. Evelyn Reed, director of the Michigan State Police Forensic Science Division. It's changing how we approach cold cases across the state, offering hope where there once was none. For the community of Newaygo, the case's resolution brought a deep measure of healing to a wound that had never fully closed. The annual remembrance gatherings for Shannon transformed from sad vigils into celebrations of persistence and the eventual triumph of justice. A ceremony attended by hundreds. The section of the Manistee National Forest leading to the hole in the woods, once a place of terror, was officially designated the Shannon Siders Memorial Trail, a path dedicated to her memory and to the pursuit of truth. People brought flowers, candles, and handwritten notes, creating an impromptu memorial that spoke volumes of a town's enduring love and its collective sigh of relief. Among them were former classmates of Shannon, now in their mid-40s, some with grown children of their own. "This town has carried Shannon's story for 25 years, said Jennifer Hayes, her voice steady but thick with emotion at the memorial. Her case changed how parents here raise their kids. It changed how we thought about safety, about trust, and now finally, it's changing how we think about justice. That it might be delayed, but it does eventually come." Perhaps the most meaningful legacy of Shannon's case has been its impact on other families waiting for answers. Bob Siders, now a figure of quiet strength and perseverance, found a new purpose in supporting others navigating the limbo of unresolved cases. He established the Shannon Siders Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding advanced DNA testing for cold cases in Michigan and providing resources to families of missing persons. The foundation's first initiative helped fund critical forensic reexaminations for 3 unsolved cases in neighboring counties, reigniting hope for families who thought their own battles were lost. I tell them what I wish someone had told me 25 years ago, Bob Siders shared, his eyes clear with a hard-won peace. That their loved one matters, that the truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, and that they're not alone in the waiting. In the evidence room of the Newaygo County Sheriff's Department, Shannon Siders' case file has been moved from the active cold case section to the solved cases archive. The box contains 26 years of investigative reports, witness statements, forensic analyses, and finally, the record of 2 brothers brought to justice. A paper trail documenting humanity's determination to find truth and deliver justice, no matter how long it takes.